Hello and a warm welcome back to True to Form with myself, Sam Turner. As you're well aware, we didn't have an edition last week out of respect to Michael O'Sullivan, his family and his friends, who continue to be very much uppermost in our thoughts going forward. We send them much love and continue to think of them as they struggle to process what's been going on in the last couple of weeks. We'll start this week's edition with reflections of a couple of Irish hurdle performances in the last 7 days. A couple of horses that really stack up well on the data and could launch a late bid for some Cheltenham Festival glory. They've been parachuted into their respective races and go there with lively chances at big prices as well. The fairer sex are well covered as well in this week's edition, with 3 mares performances in the last 7 days which stack up well on the data and could pay to follow in the weeks and months to come. And then there's the untapped potential contenders, a couple of nicely handicapped horses that look capable of leaving their current marks well behind. And we'll wind up this week's edition with a look towards the weekend, some bets for Saturday and also a possible bet for Friday. So let's begin our Irish reflections then with a horse called William Money, who won in Barry Connell's Silks at Punchestown last Thursday, the 20th of February. Sean Flanagan was the man on board, and this horse really did step forward quite considerably from his Leopardstown and Fairyhouse starts over hurdles, where he showed tons of promise but looked very raw. He looks much more proficient at Punchestown, and that was sort of backed up really with the evidence of his race IQ jumping index, which was 7.2, much better than either the first 2 starts over hurdles that he'd managed. Now, he can be a little bit keen, this horse, but crikey, he's got some engine. And he pulled and tanked his way through this Punchestown race and sprinted readily clear after the last to score by 15 lengths. His finishing speed percentage was 109.3, and his overall time figure was not one of a horse that crawled for the first circuit and then just quickened off a slovenly gallop. He really did put these horses to the sword, his rivals that is, and I was very, very taken with his performance. Now, he's around about a 12-1 chance for the Supreme Novices Hurdle, which I think is a very fair price indeed when you think that he got good form with Cowabunga, he's got good form with Work Ahead. So they're 2 horses that were very prominent in the anti-post lists for their respective novice hurdles at the Cheltenham Festival. I just think he's really learning on the job, this horse, and I think he's going to peak again come Cheltenham. This was a fine performance, and I say his cruising speed is such that I can't believe a strongly run Supreme Novices Hurdle isn't going to play to his strength. Hopefully his hurdling stands up as well, but I do think he's getting better in that sphere, and he's very much a live outsider for the Supreme Novices Hurdle. I wouldn't put anyone taking the 12-1 about him. I think he's a very fair each-way recommendation against Kopek de Board, even though I'm still with Romeo Coolio in that camp. The second horse that took my eye from across the water was on Saturday at Fairyhouse, and this was a really smart performance, I thought, from Beckett Rock, who had promised plenty in his early days. He was a really impressive winner, I think, at Gowran on debut when he bolted up on heavy ground. His next 3 starts were all over 2 miles. He managed to win one of them at Clonmel. He was well beaten behind McClory as well. But on Saturday, over 2.5, he came from a long way off the pace to chase home Barry Lyndon in a strong time. Very, very good overall speed figure. I like the fact as well that he was one of the quickest finishers over hurdles at Fairyhouse over the last mile. His finishing speed percentage was good, and his hurdling was a little bit more proficient as well. Now, he's 40-1 for the Coral Cup, and this was the requisite 5th run he needed to be able to qualify for that race as well. So although it's been sort of compressed his season into quite a narrow window, I think the fact that he was seen to good effect here, and I thought he improved for the step up to 2.5. So if he was to take his chance in the Coral Cup in a couple of weeks' time, I think he would be a lively outsider. And 40-1 non-runner, no bet, I think is a very fair recommendation, to be honest. So I'll leave you with those 2 from Ireland then, William Money and Beckett Rock, and we'll have a look at those 3 mares that have taken my eye in the last week. Which 3 mares caught the eye then last week? Well, we'll start off with Bluey, who bolted up at Market Raisin with a really tremendous performance, winning by 7.5 lengths, beating a small but select field that day under a very positive ride. She's a mare that likes to get on with it, this filly, and I was very taken with this performance. It was her best race IQ jump index as well, and despite a couple of scruffy jumps in the straight, she still managed to clock a finishing speed percentage of 110.55. So she really lengthened and put good length between herself and her rivals in the straight at Market Raisin. And it was certainly a strongly run first mile and second mile, because the overall speed figure was exceptional again for Bluey. Now, she's had a really good season already. She was second to Jubilee Alpha, of course, at Windsor. That was a good performance, and Jubilee Alpha could well end up at Cheltenham, and so could Bluey. She's qualified for the Mares' Hurdle, of course, and she's also qualified for the Mares' Final at Newbury, and I think that could be a nice fit for her. Although Emma Lavelle, her trainer, was also looking at a race up at Kelso, which is worth 100 grand. It's the Herring Queen Series Final. So 3 good options on the table then for Bluey, and it'd be interesting to see which one she takes on board. The second mare to catch my eye was at a slightly lower level, and was at Doncaster. Imperial Jade was the horse in question here, who was winning off a mark of 94 for Charlie Longsdon and David Bass. Now, we saw her early on in the season at Wincanton. She ran an encouraging race there before dipping out a little bit. But I think it was a combination of factors which saw her bounce back to form on Town Moor. I think the fact that David Bass took over in the saddle probably helped a little bit, and the fact that she got some good, genuine ground. Some nice spring ground, which I think was a key to her over this 2.5 miles. Now, her final mile was 17 or 18 lengths quicker than anything else over hurdles on the card, and she really did put good distance between herself and her rivals in the straight at Doncaster. She's going to get a fair impost, I think, for this performance. Maybe even, double digits. She might well go up in the handicap, but that still leaves her within the realms of a 0 to 105, which I think this spring Connections can really exploit. And the fact she's by Harzand, I think a speed test is always going to play to her strengths a little bit more than the slugging away on deep winter ground. So she remains one to very much keep on side, Imperial Jade, and I'll be looking out for a 2.5 mile contest, maybe even just a mare's race, spring ground, nice flat track with David Bass on board again. And as we know, Charlie Longston's horses usually appreciate a bit better ground as well, so keep her on side for the weeks and months going forward. The third of the trio then ran at Huntingdon on Thursday and was Time to Shine, who defied some market drift here for Nicky Henderson and Nico de Boinville. This was a very, very solid overall speed figure as well, despite some very errant jumping. She was very raw and novice-y. She's got loads of experience on the flat in her native France. She'd had a warm-up as well in England on the flat at Lingfield. And that experience, I don't know whether it really translated to the hurdles, because she just looked as though she'd never seen one before, which I'm sure hasn't been the case at Seven Barrows. She's going to be the type of mare that's really going to improve with experience, but she showed quite a sharp turn of foot after the last to go and win very comfortably. And given her data was so poor, but yet her speed figure was so good, I think if that gets brushed up a little bit at Seven Barrows, the hurdling technique, and she learns from this performance, I think she's going to be a really nice mare going forward. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them dip back on the flat either. The Million in Mind partnership owner, and obviously they'll place her to good advantage. So those were the 3 mares that really caught my eye in the last 7 days: Bluey, Imperial Jade, and Time to Shine. First of my untapped potential horses for this week is Demnat, who ran at Warwick last week in a very strongly run race, won by King's Threshold. It was a good performance as well from King's Threshold, off a wind up, starting to put together some consistency and travelled very well in the race. But I do think he was advantaged by the fact that they went a million up front with Storming Crossgales cutting out quite a ferocious gallop, and Demnat perhaps a little guilty of trying to follow that early pace. He was softened up a little bit late on. He didn't have the scope really of a King's Threshold, who's quite a big individual, quite raw-boned and a powerful chaser, whereas Demnat's a slighter model, better suited perhaps to the likes of maybe Ludlow, those sort of tracks really, where he's already managed to win. And now he's off a mark of 127 here, which doesn't look as though he's thrown in going forward, but hopefully the handicapper will afford him some leniency, drop him into that 0 to 125 bracket. And I think he can find a race or two this spring, probably over 2.5, forcing it over 2.5 probably on a track which suits aggressive racers, perhaps even back to Ludlow. I think with a bit of cut in the ground, he can go well. And I think if Ned Fox could have his time again, he might just have held on to Demnat for a little bit longer and just saved a little bit of his efficiency for later in the race, rather than using up plenty of petrol down the back straight, where he was then just picked off by King's Threshold. But it was a promising performance nonetheless, and I think his winning turn is round the corner. The second horse that I quite like from the last 7 days is Celtic Dino, who raced in the Dovecote at Kempton. He's already been apportioned a mark of 133, which is probably a touch toppy, but I do think there's more to come from him once he returns to some spring ground. Now, we saw him on a good surface early on in the season where he was impressive at Wincanton, clocking a very good speed figure. He then followed up at Ascot next time, winning well, and just went disappearing a little bit in the Formby at Aintree over Christmas period, where the ground was really quite testing and he just didn't enjoy it. I got much the same sort of feel about him on Saturday at Kempton. There was a good couple of days rain in and around the area prior to that meeting on Saturday, and I think the ground just got a bit gluey and a bit tacky and a bit deep for Celtic Dino. I think once he gets on a better surface, perhaps somewhere like Aintree where he's already run well, once he gets dropped into a handicap and maybe he might get £2 or £3 back for this performance, I think he'd be very interesting. The one race that I did have in mind for him was the conditional jockeys race at Aintree. I think it's on the Friday now, and that means Dylan Johnson could ride him, so they could retain their association. I think the 2 miles on good spring ground in April would suit him ideally, and with Sam Thomas's horses enjoying a great season, I think he's more than capable of winning another race and a nice prize before the season wears up. So Kelso staged their premier fixture of the season on Saturday, and they've been well rewarded for good prize money with a host of good quality entries, not least in the Bet365 Premier Chase, which could feature a fascinating duel between Iroko, who missed an engagement at Kempton on Saturday because of the ground, and also Grey Dawning, who sidesteps the Gold Cup in preference for a tilt at this race, and then before going on to Aintree for a Grade 1 test there. So that looks a fascinating race. El Elefante is also entered as well, the recent Kelso scorer. She was put up at 10-1 when the markets first opened, but that quickly got snaffled. Not by yours truly, I might add, and is into 7-1. Now, whether she runs or not is open to question, but fingers crossed they get a good field and the entries do stand up for that race, because it looks like being a fascinating duel between the two with a little bit of extra quality sprinkled alongside. Later on the card, I did like the claims of Serious Operator in the 220. We haven't seen him for a good while. Here's a problem. He is a horse that's had 1 or 2 issues with his wind, but I think he's over those now. I think he's been away for a racecourse gallop at Musselburgh recently as well, so he could be of interest at a double figure price. He's got form around Kelso, and some of his form stacks up really well with some quality horses in and around him. So I think even off his current mark, he could make some appeal in that 220, but I'll just hold fire just to see whether he runs or not. More of interest really in the More Battle hurdle is Slugger, who looks for a 4-timer in this race since being switched to Harry Derham. He's won 3 starts for Harry this year. He's jumped from a mark of 112 to 130. Started off with a good win at Carlisle, went on to Doncaster, and then won very smoothly under Alice Stevens again at Musselburgh. He's a horse that doesn't do a fat lot when he hits the front or when he's in front, so I wonder whether the handicap has fully got him just yet. This has been the target for some while. I think he's around about a 12-1 chance quite generally in the village. I think that represents a very fair each way price about a horse that is still on the upgrade, is still going the right way, won't mind what ground conditions are like, and has already won round the track. So he makes plenty of appeal in the More Battle hurdle. It's a good race though, and you'd want double figures about Slugger if you were going to play. Over at Newbury then, and Harry's also well represented with a couple of runners there that have chances. The 2 races or 3 races that I caught my eye a little bit were the 155, where Epinephrine bids to follow up her recent win at Kempton, where she overcame a bad blunder at the last to win by a wide margin. Now, she comes out of a race at Taunton that's working out extremely well at the moment, so I definitely have her on my mind as a shortlist material for this 155. Unfortunately, she might take on Norn Iron, who's a horse that moved very, very smoothly through a race won by Bucephalus when they met here a while back. And although Norn Iron didn't quite go through with it that day, I think that was more inexperience rather than him being a dodge. So I'd be keen to afford him another chance here, really. I thought the way that he travelled through that race. He got a very high cruising speed, just looks a bit inexperienced, and he was tackling a horse that has since gone on to win at Chepstow, a real doughty, hardy horse from the front who's done exceptionally well for Harriet Tucker and Neil Mulholland this year. So I don't think there was a lot of disgrace in that performance, and they stretched readily clear of the third. So I think those two horses, even though they've been sort of revisited by the handicapper recently, I still think they're nicely ahead of their marks and should go very well in that 155, whichever one turns up, if indeed they both run. Later on, I think Venetia Williams has a good chance in the handicap chase at 2:30 with Zertact, who I think is still very well handicapped once he gets conditions in his favour. Strongly run 3 mile plus or 3 miles should be absolutely ideal for him. And in the 3:05, this is another handicap hurdle, and it's for obviously open ages. And Jurencon, if he doesn't run in the Moor Battle hurdle, will be of significant interest here, I would think, given the way he's progressing. And Harry Derham also runs Lario in the OLBG colours, and I think he's got a major chance as well. He's run twice when Harry's horses perhaps haven't been firing at full capacity. At Sandown, he ran very well on desperate ground before Christmas. And then at Haydock last time, he ran another good race. He just couldn't get by a horse that was well ridden from the front and just couldn't be reeled in. But they stretched readily clear of the third again. Now, Lario's been inching up the weights, unfortunately, for not winning. So takes on a different class of horse again here, but he's a progressive horse, and I think a flat 2 miles on a galloping track look absolutely ideal for him. So I think he'll give the Derham camp another good runner at Newbury on Saturday afternoon. And talking of the Derham camp, they also run a rare horse on the flat on Friday afternoon at Lingfield in their staying contest at 4:10. Now, you have to take it on trust that Give Me 5 will like the all-weather surface, but he looks very nicely handicapped at the moment off 72. And don't forget, he ran second on the flat at Haydock last September, when he was getting ready for a hurdling campaign, and managed to finish a good second to Surrey Bell, who was trained by Hughie Morrison at the time. Now, she's been switched since to Adrian Keatley, has won a couple of hurdle races, looks quite progressive, and I thought Give Me 5 would have to have a major chance with Holly Doyle booked on Friday afternoon. So there we are then, that's this week's show. Thanks very much for your comments on YouTube, and appreciate any questions that you might have for the Cheltenham Festival. We'll do our best to answer those, so please keep sending those in. Until next week, bye for now, enjoy your sport.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.